Pagan practices. What is paganism? Paganism is defined as a religion that worships many gods, especially a religion that existed before the main world religions. Paganism can look different for every individual. Some worship nature, others worship the gods and goddesses, or the combination of nature and the gods. There are many different types and practices that branch off of paganism. Some examples include Wicca, Hellenism, heathenry, neo-paganism, and traditional modern witchcraft. As I mentioned in the previous slide, there are many different branches when it comes to pagan practices. The ones I will be discussing are Wicca, heathenry, and traditional modern neo-paganism. Wicca is a religion that affirms the existence of supernatural power, such as magic, and of both female and male deities who inhere in nature, and the emphasis ritual observance of seasonal and life cycles. Heathenry describes the people that once lived in the area of the North Sea and followed polytheistic religious beliefs, so Norse paganism. They primarily worship the Norse gods, and in modern times, Norse and Celtic religions are often practiced together. Neo-paganism is a modern religion that has beliefs and practices not from any of the main world religions, such as Christianity and Judaism, and focuses more on worship of nature and traditions in its past pagan religions. Wiccan practices focus more on the appreciation of nature and the magic that it has to offer rather than the worship of gods and goddesses. Their practices include tarot reading, spell bottle making, and the use of crystal and oils, and the use of the moon. Everything they do is to create a better connection to the earth and to themselves, also known as the divine masculine or the divine feminine. Here's a short video that explains a little more about Wicca in today's world.
Well, first, what it means to be a Wiccan is to be somebody who believes that the divine manifests as and through all of the natural world. And so we relate to the divine through the turning of the seasons, the cycles of the moon, through ceremonies that connect us with the earth, and see the earth as the center of balance that we can relate to. To be a Wiccan in the modern world is to move from being a religion that operated entirely in secret because we were persecuted and had to meet behind closed doors and in the dark, to suddenly being thrust in the public view, and sort of changing our sense of self from being inward looking and focused primarily on self-preservation to being outward looking and now taking advantage of the opportunities that present themselves to put our principles into action in the world with other faith traditions. Well, actually, strangely enough, there's a huge overlap between people involved in science and computers and people involved in Wicca. And some of the earliest large websites that devoted to religious resources were run by Wiccans. So we're very tech savvy, lots of people have computers, websites are up. And as an underground movement sort of coming into public awareness, the web has been, if you'll excuse the phrase, a godsend to allow us to connect with each other. The biggest change it's worked on us is when we were a more secretive religion, it meant that the only way you could get involved was to meet someone and develop a personal relationship. And so only people who were really dedicated and spent time could finally meet someone and make their way in. Now with the websites up, anyone can go online and find something about Wicca online and now say, hey, I'm a Wiccan. And so that changes our sense of identity, because it used to be a much more tight-knit, almost family or tribal type group, and now it's becoming the kind of faith tradition where anyone who feels moved to do so can just affiliate. And that changes our sense of self, of who we are. Well, the easiest things are probably when we explain that Wicca is basically based in the indigenous religions of Europe. And so you can think of something like Shinto or Native American, but with a European Mediterranean cultural setting, and have a pretty good idea of who we are. Another thing is that we really focus on the immanence of the divine, that the divine is manifest here, right now, in the wind, the trees, the sea, that chair, you, me, and that if we take that idea seriously, we have to treat all things, living and unliving around us, with respect. But that idea of immanence is one that's found in almost every faith tradition. Some emphasize it, some focus more on transcendence, but the fact that that is present in almost every faith tradition is an immediate bridge that allows people to understand us and relate to us. The hardest thing, I think, is that we are still closer to those indigenous roots in our practices than a lot of the mainstream, if I can use the word, civilized religions. We believe in meeting outdoors, out in nature. We believe many of us will meet skyclad, which is naked, if the opportunity arises, to be closer to nature. Some don't, some work robed. It's always an individual choice. So many of our ceremonies and practices are more directly related to the natural world that they seem foreign to especially Abrahamic religious traditions. Also, sometimes people have a hard time grasping the idea that we focus on developing a personal relationship with the divine, and while we may have inherited written teachings, we don't have a scripture. And a lot of people think that that means you don't have rules, you don't have something forcing you to behave properly, and think that it means that anything goes. And it's hard sometimes for them to grasp the idea that if you're really focusing on a personal relationship with the divine, that divine guidance will guide you to proper behavior. And you don't need to rely on external rules to be virtuous people. Well, most witches practice magic in some form or other. It's the craft part of witchcraft. And so a lot of what we do in magical rituals is create in microcosm, in a small form, what you want to see happen on the larger scale. And every time I come to a Parliament of the World's Religions, or indeed any major religious interfaith gathering, you see people from all over the world, deeply committed to their own faith traditions, coming together and forming a community where they not only get along, but they really enjoy sitting down and talking with each other. And right here, right now, we see a microcosm of what's possible for the entire world to be. I sometimes say, come see what the world can be. Come to an interfaith conference. So to me, this is a magical act. We're all together of us performing a spell here to improve the world.
Heathens are much more traditional in their practices, where they hold feasts and large celebrations for certain events, such as rites of passage, which include marriages, births, and funerals, and other events dedicated to honoring the gods and goddesses. You would create an altar dedicated to the gods or goddesses of your choice and offer them food or drink. Then, once you have given them their offering, you would follow with a feast of your own to honor what they have given you. Popular holidays such as Easter and Christmas are based in heathen pagan roots, traditionally called Yule or Ostera, which involve celebrations around spring and winter solstices. Gods such as Thor, Loki, and Odin are popular among worship in heathen religions, which is the religion I practice. Neo-paganism is much like the other two practices. It is different for every person and is open for interpretations. It usually involves the worship of both nature and deities together. For example, creating an altar with specific candles, flowers, foods, and drinks and crystals can be given to a deity in worship to enhance the spiritual traits and offerings the deity is known for, such as Aphrodite or Apollo. In the top right-hand corner, we have an altar dedicated to the spirits of nature. That is not a pentagram. That is a pentacle dedicated to fire, earth, wind, and air, all the spirits. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have an altar dedicated to Aphrodite. In the top left-hand corner, we have a celebration called Midsummer. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we have a traditional feast that most heathens use during the winter and sometimes fall solstices, where they offer meat, wine, and mead to the gods and goddesses. Over the past 2 centuries, pagan practices and religions were not the best thing to be known for. They got the stereotype that paganism means the worship of Satan, which you will find is completely untrue. There are 2 different religions, and they have literally nothing to do with each other. Religion has always been a touchy subject for a lot of people, but I believe that as the times move forward, the stigmatism around pagan practices are getting demolished and people are starting to treat it as true colors.